So we're here today with Candice Randell to discuss the following statement. Folk psychology is a fiction, but a useful one, and we can't really do without it. Do you support or deny this claim?
Today, I'm going to argue that folk psychology is a legitimate practice due to empirical evidence and the necessity of its use in human interaction. Folk psychology is usually seen through the approach of mind-reading others, but I believe this to be an inaccurate and flawed take on the attributing intention, desire, and belief to behaviors and mental states. Instead, I will argue that folk psychology can be justified when we shift its core concept of mind-reading to mind-shaping, based on Zabwisky's 2008 article, The Function of Folk Psychology, Mind-Reading or Mind-Shaping. I will explain how mind-shaping works and why it is detrimental to societal cohesion and progression.
Okay, so first of all, what is folk psychology?
Folk psychology is attributing mental states using a desire-belief model. We use our own mind to make sense of others and their actions using propositional attitude ascription. Mental states are difficult, if not impossible, to observe, so we ascribe them to make sense of things.
It is claimed that folk psychology is fiction. What evidence is there for folk psychology?
In psychological research, they demonstrate and investigate the use of folk psychology. As early as 3 years old, we can see the emergence of folk psychology in children as they attribute desires and perceptual states to others. By 4, they begin to attribute beliefs and can recognize false beliefs. This phenomenon has been investigated significantly in developmental psychology. We cannot claim it as fiction if the existing concept is actualized in individuals' behavior numerous times every day, especially when evidence of its existence and its use is supported in empirical research. To deny folk psychology's existence would be flawed, but to question its accuracy and the parameters of the concept is a different story. Although there has been much debate into how we ascribe mental states to behaviors through theories such as simulation theory and theory theory, it is commonly neglected to investigate why we use folk psychology. There is no doubt that folk psychology is useful as we use it daily in a large amount of interactions, but its importance doesn't mainly sit in how it works, but rather what it achieves. Evaluating the usefulness by its outcome, not the process. Most people would agree that the purpose and function of folk psychology is to make sense of things and predict others' actions and intentions, commonly seen as mind-reading ability.
Could you explain to me the concept of mind reading according to folk psychology?
Mind reading is defined as an accurate behavioral prediction based on an accurate representation of cognitive states and commonly seen as the main function of propositional attitude ascription. It assists in navigating our social interactions in the world around us, but in reality, it is commonly inaccurate and considered an unreliable tool for everyday attitude ascription and behavioral prediction.
You claim mind reading as inaccurate and flawed. How is this so?
Patricia Churchland suggests that folk psychology posits as a false theory of the causes behind human behavior. If it is useful and provides accurate results in one context, it is highly unlikely it will continue to be accurate in most other contexts, due to the complexity of human interaction and behavior. Morton elaborates on this flaw of mind reading through complexity and holism. Attribution is complex due to the nature of behavior and mental states having a large number of possible causal and contributed factors for each individual. It is difficult to pinpoint the actual influences among the multitudes of possibilities. Next, we attempt to figure out the intentionality behind such actions, creating a whole new level of complexity, with conscious and unconscious drives directing intention, once again varying between the individual. Majority of factors in this attributive process lack the ability to be externally observed, leaving possibility for infinite interpretations. This spills into the holistic problem. We cannot create laws under mind reading, as regularities are next to impossible to formulate with infinite possibilities and such complexity. In addition to complexity and holism, issues can be found in real-world usage of mind reading. To adequately navigate and successfully coordinate social interactions in face-to-face contact, we must be able to predict and attribute others' beliefs, desires, and intention with speed and accuracy. From research in cognitive science, it is suggested that our mind-reading abilities can be quite accurate if given time to figure out an event. But in reality, we lack the resources and time to calculate such predictions, resulting in common inaccuracy.
So, If folk psychology is so impractical and inaccurate, why does it still persist?
Folk psychology persists as it is useful, in fact crucial to human interaction. It's widely agreed upon that the mental state ascription ability of folk psychology plays an important role in solving social coordination problems. Human interaction is one of the most, if not the most, important of ecological tasks. If humans lacked communication and understanding of one another's behaviors, intentions, and mental states, social cohesion would be unachievable, and societal advancement would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. What is impractical and inaccurate is the mind reading used to make sense of one another. Through this approach, understanding each other through folk psychology is what Zawidlitsky claims to be a fool's errand. Yet folk psychology can still be redeemed and saved from rejection. To understand this, we have to shift the concept of folk psychology from the ability of mind reading to the ability of mind shaping. Folk psychology itself is not impractical and inaccurate. It's just the use of mind reading is flagged as a flawed concept. We cannot accurately represent our peers' mental states due to the infinite possibilities, but we can shape our friends' minds to make communication and understanding of interaction easier. In turn, mind shaping does not aim to do the improbable, but simplify complexities and increase accuracy. In fact, by shaping the minds around us and figuring out the social tokens that shape our minds, our ability to mind read others improves.
Can you elaborate on how mind shaping works?
Recently, theorists such as Yuval's own Hutto have suggested humans possess low-level perceptual attainment to patterns of behaviors. We use signals such as eye direction, facial expressions, and other embodied attitude signals to anticipate others' actions and facilitate interaction with them. This takes away the emphasis of needing to fully understand a mental state concepts to adequately use folk psychology. There are many external signals and indicators of intention, mental states, and behavior that are shaped even further by external parameters. There's a shift away from the understanding of mental states to the shaping of mental norms of those around us according to these culturally set parameters, also known as mind shaping. Zawitsky uses the example of driving cars and road rules to explain how mind-shaping practices simplify and increase accuracy of the attribution process. When we are driving, we do not have the adequate ability to ascribe the fellow driver's cognition and mental states with enough speed and accuracy to navigate each other's driving path and avoid a car crash. But we don't need to use the attribution process, as there are road rules in place to direct driving behavior and provide attributive information for other drivers' actions. This applies to real life in social interactions. Over time, humans develop simple mechanisms to shape behavior to make it more predictable and easier to socially coordinate with others. The possibilities of attribution we need to make sense of things are cut down significantly when it is expected for others to be appropriately socialized in societal and cultural norms, and follow them through with the common sanction response. The social rules create social cohesion and coordination for members of a society through the increased ability of understanding one another. Through legislation and education, these are refined and passed down through the generations. This notion finds a place for folk psychology as a legitimate and valid practice.
That makes sense in the bigger scheme of things. But how does the individual mind shape another?
Well, if you think about it, when we incorrectly ascribe an attribution or see a behavior deviant to the norm, we can make one of two choices. We can either revise our own ascription or call out the subject's ascription as being wrong. Zawitsky claims people usually do the latter. When we observe defiant behavior, we defend our ascription and project our beliefs onto the individual, along with the pressure and expectation to conform to our norm. We then sit back knowing that failing conform to the norm has consequences that they must deal with. The other will either have to have their mind shaped by our pressure and expectations, or they will have to justify and explain the reasons that they behaved, and that the interpreter may not have been aware of in the attribution process. By teaching, applying, and upholding these norms, we increase the ability to produce more speedy and accurate attributions of beliefs, desires, and intentions to mental states and behavior. The number of possibilities is cut down dramatically, and in the face of behavior deviant to the norm, we seek justification for breaking the norm while pushing conformity to the norm. This enhances human interaction and predictability, strengthening and validating the usefulness of folk psychology. Rather than the mind-reading take on folk psychology of developing increasingly sophisticated internal models of attribution of others' minds to make sense of things, The mind-shaping approach sees that our species responds to increasing complex social situations by developing simplified norms and shaping others' minds to conform to the norms to help make sense of things, once again legitimizing folk psychology as an authentic practice.
So, in conclusion, you're claiming that folk psychology is a legitimate, useful, and necessary practice? Are there any limitations that may confound your statement?
Well, on this stance, there are two main limitations that should be pointed out. First example is of cultural relativity. The norms in different cultures can vary significantly, and we can see this in the outcome of miscommunication or lack of understanding between groups of people we commonly see in the media. This is where the application of mind-shaping approach of psychology flounders, as some behaviours are considered deviant in some cultures while acceptable in others, and if you are the outsider, you are the one holding the deviant behaviour, it's incongruent with your understanding of how to conduct one's behaviour according to the appropriate social rules. This leads to a lack of social coordination and cohesion and creates a barrier to understanding one another. While the application of the mind-shaping approach flounders here, an explanation through the mind-shaping approach still stands valid. The second limitation is the assumption that Zabwitsky makes about people will mostly discredit a deviant behavior and push expectations on the other to conform to norms instead of reevaluating their own attribution to the other's deviant behavior. I find that in this current social culture of Western civilization, especially with the rise of the internet, people are seeking to broaden their understanding of one another and their motives or intention, while also seeking to break the norms in pursuit of individual expression of existence. This push for nonconformity may be a big problem for the mind-shaping approach to folk psychology and may result in attributions being found more accurate in the mind-reading approach. But as a general conclusion, yes, I believe folk psychology is not fiction, as we have empirical evidence of its use and find necessity in its use to function adequately in social environments. Through the mind-shaping approach to folk psychology, we achieve social cohesion and coordination needed for harmonious and progressive living, as without an understanding of each other, humanity would fail to interact and cooperate.